The Boston County Courthouse gleams like polished marble in the morning sun as I push through the heavy oak doors. My heels click against the floor, each step measured and controlled despite the storm churning inside me. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old paper fills my lungs. I've walked these halls hundreds of times, but never like this, never as the defendant. I spot them immediately. My parents. The word feels foreign, a label without substance. Linda's perfectly manicured hand rests on the sleeve of her attorney as she leans in, whispering something that makes them both smirk. The diamond bracelet on her wrist catches the light, sending prisms dancing across the wall. She's dressed for effect Chanel suit, hair freshly colored the same honey blonde she's maintained since I was a baby she left behind. Mark stands slightly apart, checking his watch. His baseball physique has softened with age, but he still carries himself with that athlete's confidence, as if life is a game he expects to win. They don't notice me at first, giving me a moment to steel myself, to remember why I'm here. Look who finally showed up. Linda stage whispers to Mark. Our abandoned daughter graces us with her presence. The irony of her words stings like salt in an old wound. I smooth my simple black suit and walk past them without acknowledgement, taking my seat at the defendant's table. The whispers continue behind me, but I focus on arranging my notes, on breathing. The bailiff's voice cuts through the murmur. All rise. The Honorable Judge Robert Reynolds presiding. We stand as Judge Reynolds enters, his robes sweeping behind him as he takes the bench. His eyes scan the room, pausing when they reach me. Assistant District Attorney Carter, he says, surprise evident in his tone. Unusual to see you as the defendant today. Yes, Your Honor, I respond, my voice steadier than I feel. Family matters bring us all to unexpected places. Behind me, I hear Linda's sharp intake of breath. When I glance back, the color has drained from Mark's face. They didn't know. They had no idea their abandoned daughter had become a prosecutor and a good one. The power imbalance they'd counted on has just shifted beneath their feet. Their attorney, Miles Archer, recovers first. His expression hardens as he reassesses me, no longer seeing an easy target but a worthy opponent. And suddenly, I'm not in that courtroom anymore. I'm in Portland, Maine, July 1993. The air is thick with heat, sticking shirts to backs and tempers to tongues. I'm 4 months old, too young to understand what's happening, but old enough to feel the tension as my parents argue over the trunk of their car. It's just for a few months, Mom, Linda promises Margaret, who stands with me bundled in her arms. Just until we get established. You know how hard it is starting out. Margaret's face is tight with things unsaid. From the porch swing, Charles watches silently, his judge's eyes missing nothing. He's retired now, but the authority clings to him like his aftershave. The baby needs stability, Margaret says, her voice low but firm. Linda rolls her eyes, checks her lipstick in the side mirror. She has you too. What could be more stable than a judge and his wife? Mark slams the trunk closed. We've got to hit the road if we want to make it before dark. They kiss me goodbye, perfunctory touches, already gone in their minds. The car pulls away without a backward glance, and I don't know it then, but a few months will stretch into years of absence punctuated by obligatory holiday appearances. What I do know is the feeling of Margaret's tears falling on my forehead as she watches her only daughter drive away. My grandparents gave me everything my parents couldn't or wouldn't. Charles taught me justice through bedtime stories about his cases, moral lessons wrapped in tales about real people making hard choices. Margaret's kitchen was where I learned about love consistent, reliable, unconditional. They never missed a school play or award ceremony, sitting front and center while my parents' chairs remained empty. On the rare occasions Linda and Mark did appear, their affection felt hollow, performances rather than genuine connection. When I was 16, Margaret died suddenly, a stroke that took her in the night. The funeral was small, dignified, like her. My parents arrived 40 minutes late, Linda complaining about her black dress in the church bathroom, while I stood by my grandmother's casket. I'll make you proud, Grandma, I whispered, my hand on the polished wood. Charles squeezed my shoulder, his grief as palpable as my own. At that moment, something crystallized within me, the knowledge that my real family had never been Linda and Mark. It had been here, in the steady presence of two people who chose to love me every day. Yet even then, some small, foolish part of me brightened when Linda hugged me after the service. Charles saw it happen, the hope flickering across my face at this rare maternal touch. I still wish they'd stay, I admitted to him that night, ashamed of this weakness. His eyes were kind but knowing. Love is a choice we make every day, Joe. A choice my parents had never made until money was involved. Miss Carter, Judge Reynolds says, pulling me back to the present. Will you be represented by counsel today? Before I can answer, Miles Archer rises. Your Honor, the plaintiff questions Miss Carter's competence to manage such substantial assets. Linda nods vigorously beside him, still not grasping what's happening. I almost pity her. Your Honor, I say calmly, I'll be represented by Evan Mitchell. And for the record, I prosecuted 3 successful fraud cases before your bench last month. The judge's subtle nod tells me everything. He sees through them already. And for the first time since Charles died, I know exactly how this ends. A month before, rain pelted the windows of Charles's study, a fitting backdrop to the hollow quiet that had settled over the house since the funeral. Josephine stood motionless before his mahogany desk, fingers hovering above a wooden box she'd never seen before. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away the seconds, its steady rhythm, the only sound besides the storm outside. What were you keeping from me, Charles? She whispered, lifting the ornately carved lid. Inside lay a series of leather-bound ledgers, each labeled with a year spanning the past 2 decades. She recognized her grandfather's meticulous handwriting immediately, the precise script of a man who believed details mattered. Pulling out the most recent volume, Josephine settled into Charles's leather chair, inhaling the lingering scent of his aftershave. The first entry hit her like a physical blow. January 2025. Linda called requesting additional funds for Mark's business venture. Sent $2,500 as usual. Makes 264 consecutive monthly payments. Josephine's hands trembled as she reached for Charles's calculator. The math wasn't complicated, but she needed to see the number. 22 years. $2,500 every month. The sum on the display made her stomach clench. $660,000. They took enough to buy a house? She whispered, pressing her palms against the cool surface of the desk to steady herself. She pulled out more ledgers, each containing the same pattern. Year after year of $2,500 payments, all meticulously documented in Charles's precise script. Between the pages, she found photographs: Linda on a yacht in the Mediterranean, Mark at exclusive golf courses. Images dated during weeks when Linda had claimed she was too busy to visit her ailing father. The clock struck midnight as Josephine moved to Charles's computer. The password came to her instantly: Margaret's birthday, the one date he never forgot. Among the desktop folders, one caught her eye: Linda requests. Email after email unfolded before her, a systematic pattern of manipulation so transparent it made her teeth ache. Dad, Mark needs new equipment for tryouts. The coach says he has real potential this time. Daddy, I miss you terribly but can't afford the trip right now. If you could help just this once. Between the blatant appeals were more insidious messages. Mom always said you loved Josephine more than me. I guess she was right. Mark's requests were rarer but larger business ventures that produced nothing but excuses. The realization crystallized with painful clarity. They had never seen Charles as a father or grandfather. He had been nothing more than an ATM to them. Josephine closed the emails, needing air, but instead found herself searching public records. Attorney Miles Archer's name appeared connected to multiple aggressive inheritance disputes. Linda's social media accounts, usually set to private, had recent posts visible to friends hinting at family wealth finally coming their way. A deeper search revealed Mark's gambling debts, tens of thousands owed to people who didn't send polite collection notices. County records showed something even more damning. Linda had been involved in 3 prior inheritance disputes with other relatives. The narrative they were constructing became clear. Charles had been manipulated by Josephine in his final years. She was the villain in their story, the obstacle between them and money they believed was rightfully theirs. As dawn approached, Josephine noticed a desk drawer she'd overlooked, marked with her name in Charles's handwriting. Inside lay a sealed envelope, the wax emblem of his judicial office still intact. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal, unfolding a single page of Charles's stationery. My dearest Josephine, if you're reading this, they've already begun their pursuit. Remember what I taught you. Justice isn't always found in courtrooms. Sometimes it's in standing firmly for truth. You have always been the best of me. They know it too, which is why they fear you. With all my love, Charles. Enclosed was a photograph. She'd never seen Charles in his judge's robes, young and resolute, with the same determined expression she recognized from her own mirror. The tears came then, hot and cleansing, giving way to something harder, more certain. She wouldn't surrender Charles's legacy to those who had abandoned them both. Defending herself wasn't just about money, it was about honoring the man who had chosen to be her father when her own hadn't. The next morning, Josephine met Judge Elaine Rivers at the courthouse cafe. The older woman's silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharply assessing as they spoke in hushed tones. Charles spoke of you with such pride, Josephine, Rivers said, stirring her coffee without looking at the spoon. He knew this day might come. What do I do? Josephine asked, the first time she'd allowed herself to voice uncertainty. Document everything. Your parents underestimate you. Use that. Rivers slid a business card across the table. Thomas Wilson clerked for your grandfather. He'll testify to Charles's mental clarity. That evening, Linda's voice filled Josephine's answering machine, saccharine and urgent. Josie, darling, we need your legal expertise on this little inheritance matter. Josephine drafted her response carefully, each word a boundary. Within minutes of sending it, her office phone rang. But we're family. But Linda's voice had lost its sweetness. Family shows up for more than money, mother. The word felt foreign on her tongue. An hour later, Mark's message arrived, threats thinly veiled as concern. Josephine saved it immediately, another piece of evidence for the growing file. That night, for the first time since Charles's passing, she slept without waking. The cost had been steep, the final severing of any hope for a genuine relationship with her parents. But in its place stood something stronger, the certainty that she was her grandfather's heir in all the ways that mattered. The Boston Globe lands with a thud on my kitchen counter 2 days later. Linda's face stares up at me from page 3, eyes brimming with perfectly timed tears. Heartbroken mother fights for justice, screams the headline. I scan the article, bile rising in my throat as I read her fabricated tale of devotion. Charles was like a father to me after my own past, she claims in the interview. To see his wishes twisted by someone with such influence over him in his final days. I slam the paper shut. The woman who visited her father 8 times in a decade suddenly portrays herself as a grieving daughter. The irony would be laughable if it weren't so infuriating. My phone buzzes. It's Thomas Wilson, my office colleague. Mark Carter was here, he says without preamble. Cornered me in the parking garage to express concerns about your stability. Wanted to know if you'd been acting erratic at work. I press my fingers against the bridge of my nose. What did you tell him? That his timing seemed remarkably convenient given the inheritance dispute. Thomas pauses. Joe, they're working from every angle. The Attorney General's office received anonymous calls questioning your ethics. Before I can respond, my email pings. It's Evan Mitchell. Miles Archer has filed an emergency motion claiming Charles was incompetent when he drafted his will. The court date has been moved up by 2 weeks. They're accelerating, Evan writes. Archer knows a rushed timeline works against thorough preparation. The walls seem to close in around me, but instead of panic, I feel something else, a cold, clarifying anger. They think I'll buckle under pressure. They're wrong. That night, I spread documents across Charles's mahogany desk, the same desk where he wrote landmark opinions that shaped Massachusetts law. Sleep is a luxury I can't afford. I arrange evidence chronologically, a methodical timeline of parental absence. In one box, I find holiday cards spanning 20 years. I examine each one, noting the generic messages. Merry Christmas, kiddo. Love, Mom and Dad. No references to achievements, interests, or personal details. They never knew me well enough to include them. Another folder contains Charles's private journal entries. Linda called again about money. One reads from when I was 12. Nothing about Josephine's piano recital or how she's doing in school. When I mentioned she won the regional competition, Linda changed the subject. In a dusty album, I discover something that makes my hands shake: videos of childhood milestones. My high school graduation, college commencement, law school ceremony. In each one, 2 chairs in the front row are marked with handwritten signs, reserved for Linda and Mark Carter. Empty chairs that Charles kept saving despite knowing they wouldn't come. I trace my finger over his neat handwriting. They never really knew me at all, I whisper to the empty room. The following morning finds me at Mount Auburn Cemetery. The early autumn air carries a chill as I place fresh flowers on Charles's grave. My weekly ritual, something Linda and Mark never bothered with during his life or after his death. I'm arranging the stems when I hear footsteps on gravel. Looking up, I see Linda approaching, a designer coat buttoned against the chill. Her face registers surprise, then calculation. "I didn't expect to find you here," she says, glancing at her watch, as though, even in death, Charles is just another appointment. "I come every week," I reply, standing to face her. A groundskeeper works in the distance. The rhythmic sound of his rake scraping leaves the only noise between us. Linda's face hardens. "You turned him against us." The accusation hangs in the crisp air. I take a measured breath, feeling Charles's presence beside me. "He saw you clearly," I said quietly. "So do I." Something in my calm tone seems to snap her control. Her carefully crafted mask slips. "You always had it easy." His favorite. She spits the words. "We struggled while you lived in that mansion, getting everything handed to you." I look at her, really look at her, perhaps for the first time, seeing the desperate, bitter woman beneath the polished exterior. "I had grandparents because I had to." I say, "You had a father you chose to ignore." The slap comes fast, echoing between gravestones. My cheek burns, but I don't flinch. Linda's hand hangs in the air, her eyes widening as if shocked by her own action. "That's the last time," I tell her, my voice steady. "You will never touch me again." I walk away, leaving her standing alone by the grave of the father she never bothered to know. Back home, I find 3 voicemails waiting. Judge Rivers asking to meet privately about court procedures. Evan Mitchell offering to work pro bono. Charles helped me through law school when no one else would. The office manager approving extended leave despite our heavy caseload. Each call represents someone showing up, contrasting sharply with the parents who never did. That afternoon, Thomas Wilson arrives with a thick folder. "Archer has a pattern," he explains, spreading documents across my table. "Questionable tactics in 3 prior inheritance cases, always representing clients with tenuous claims to large estates." As Thomas details his findings, my doorbell rings. Charles's former housekeeper stands on my porch, manila envelope in hand. "I was with him every day for 15 years, she says firmly. "That man was sharp until the end. I've written it all down. Dates, conversations, everything. Use it however you need." After she leaves, I add her statement to a growing pile. People are appearing from every corner of Charles's life, offering support, testimony, evidence. Each one proves what true loyalty looks like. Late that night, I discovered something hidden behind Charles's law books, a leather-bound personal journal I hadn't seen before. My hands tremble as I open it. An entry from the week before his death catches my eye. "Linda called about the will today. Not about my health, though she claimed otherwise. Asked probing questions about my estate planning. Never once asked how I was feeling." I turn to the final page, dated 3 days before he died. "Appointed Josephine executor, knowing she alone has integrity to handle this. The others will come for what they think they deserve. They'll underestimate her, as they always have." Tucked inside the back cover is a sealed envelope addressed to the probate judge, explaining in Charles's precise handwriting his sound mind and deliberate decisions regarding his estate. 2 days later, in the preliminary hearing on the competency challenge, I sat beside Evan as he presented this letter along with medical records and witness statements. Miles Archer's face grows increasingly tense as Judge Reynolds reviews the evidence. The evidence suggests Justice Carter was acutely aware of his decisions and their implications. Judge Reynolds finally declares, dismissing the motion, "The will stands as written pending full probate proceedings." It's a small victory but a significant one, the first public defeat for Archer. As we exit the courtroom, I catch Linda's expression. For the first time, genuine concern replaces her confident smirk. That evening, I created a comprehensive evidence binder, dividing it by category: financial records showing patterns of exploitation, my detailed timeline of their absence from significant events, medical records confirming Charles's mental clarity, and Linda's contradictory statements highlighted in different colors. I add video testimonials from Charles's colleagues and cross-reference Mark's gambling debts with the timing of their inheritance claim. Each piece fits together like a puzzle, revealing their true motivation. As I finish organizing, my phone rings. It's Evan, his voice urgent. Josephine, I've found sealed court records from Linda's previous disputes. There were 2 other wills she contested her uncle's in 1998 and her cousin's in 2007. Same pattern, same claims. I grip the phone tighter. She has a history of this. Yes, and Judge Rivers just called. She's found a legal precedent that applies directly to our case, Peterson versus Thornhill, 2012. The Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled that repeated inheritance challenges constitute a pattern of exploitation. I add this final piece to my binder, a quiet confidence settling over me. I look up at Charles's photo on my desk, his eyes seeming to watch me with pride. They won't see this coming, I whisper, my voice echoing in the quiet room. The final battle lies ahead, but for the first time since this began, I know with certainty that I will win. A day before the courtroom confrontation, the conference room glass reflected my image as I arranged the folders in precise chronological order. Each deposition transcript represented another nail in Linda and Mark's coffin, a coffin they'd been building for 22 years without realizing it. They've filed a motion to exclude, Evan announced, entering with coffee and a stack of legal briefs. His tie hung slightly loose, evidence of the all-nighter we'd pulled preparing. Archer's claiming our evidence is prejudicial rather than probative. I nodded, unsurprised. They would. My voice remained steady, betraying none of the fury simmering beneath. Which judge? Peterson, Evan grimaced. Not ideal. Judge Peterson's reputation for excessive caution was well known in legal circles. I'd argued before him twice, won both times, but barely. We have alternatives ready. I tapped the blue folder containing our contingency strategies. Charles had taught me to prepare for every possible judicial ruling, favorable or not. When's the hearing? Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Evan glanced at his watch. That gives us 20 hours to shore up the psychological expert testimony. I turned to the window, gazing at Boston's skyline. Somewhere across town, Linda was probably selecting her outfit, rehearsing her tears. The Boston Herald lay open on the table, her tearful interview splashed across page 3. Mother fights for family legacy. The PR consultant they'd hired had done her job well. The article painted me as calculating and cold, the ungrateful daughter who had manipulated an elderly man. For a moment, doubt flickered not about the case, but about public perception. Did people actually believe her? This isn't about headlines, I reminded myself, echoing what Judge Rivers had told me during our late-night call yesterday. The court sees evidence, not media narratives. Rivers had been my lifeline through this process, her wisdom steadying me when emotions threatened to overtake strategy. They want you to be reactive, she'd said. Don't give them that satisfaction. My phone buzzed a message from Thomas Wilson, who'd been tracking down financial records. Found something. Meeting at lunch? I texted back a confirmation. The deposition schedule lay before me, a carefully orchestrated symphony. Financial analyst Jerome Bennett at 10 a.m., followed by Dr. Levinson's testimony about Charles's mental acuity. By afternoon, 3 witnesses from Linda's previous inheritance disputes would arrive, each unaware of the others until they came face to face in the waiting room. Evan shuffled papers, breaking my reverie. Your boss called. Mark stopped by the DA's office yesterday. My hand froze over the calendar. What did he want? Raises concerns about your emotional stability and potential conflict of interest. Evan's jaw tightened. Suggested you might be misusing office resources. The calculated nature of their attack revealed both intelligence and desperation. Attack my professional standing while challenging my evidence. I closed my eyes, allowing 3 seconds of pure rage, before compartmentalizing it away. What did Jameson say? Told him to put any concerns in writing and submit them through proper channels. Evan smiled slightly. Then mentioned he was looking forward to attending court tomorrow in support of his most promising Ada. Something warm unfurled in my chest, not triumph but recognition. This was what support looked like. Not Linda's tearful performances or Mark's false concern, but people standing beside you when attacks came. By noon, I'd corrected the technical filing errors Archer's team had identified. A simple date discrepancy, Easily remedied but sufficient for delay if left unchallenged. Their strategy was becoming clear. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. Each small victory would drain our resources and energy. Thomas arrived with a thick folder of bank statements. "I tracked the money," he said, spreading documents across the table. "Every single transfer from Charles to Linda for 22 years. But here's the interesting part." He pointed to highlighted entries. The amounts spiked whenever Mark had career setbacks. The pattern emerged clearly: $5,000 withdrawals following Mark's team cuts, $10,000 after his final release from minor leagues. Each professional failure followed by larger financial demands on Charles. They were bleeding him dry. Thomas said quietly. "No," I corrected, studying the pattern. "They were bleeding him strategically." After Thomas left, I sat alone, the Boston afternoon sunlight slanting across the documents. For the first time, I truly understood that this fight wasn't about money. The inheritance was substantial, $2.7 million, but this case represented something far more valuable. Charles's agency, his right to determine the legacy of his life's work. My phone rang Linda's number. I almost declined but then answered, putting it on speaker as Evan returned. "Josie, darling." Her voice dripped with practiced maternal concern. "This has gotten out of hand. We can work this out as a family." The word family in her mouth sounded hollow, a convenience rather than a commitment. "That's what court is for now," I replied, my voice even. "You're being ridiculous. Your father and I filed false claims about Charles's mental state, hired a PR firm, approached my boss with fabricated concerns." I kept my tone clinical, as if discussing case facts rather than personal betrayal. Linda's pause spoke volumes. "We can split it, 60-40. Evan raised an eyebrow at the insulting offer. "I'll see you in court tomorrow, Linda." I ended the call. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Miles Archer looked immaculate but strained, his confidence visibly diminished since our first encounter. Mark sat slightly apart from Linda, their unity fracturing under pressure. Dr. Levinson took the stand first, her credentials impeccable, as she detailed Charles's cognitive assessments. "In your professional opinion, was Justice Carter mentally competent when he revised his will?" Evan asked. "Absolutely," she replied. "His MMSE score was 29 out of 30, exceptional for any age." Miles Archer rose for cross-examination, his approach aggressive. "And yet you never assessed him specifically for undue influence, did you?" "Objection," Evan called. "Calls for speculation." "Sustained." Archer's frustration flickered across his face. He'd expected an amateur opponent, not a coordinated legal strategy. By midday, the financial analyst had methodically outlined every payment from Charles to Linda, $2,500, monthly for 22 years, totaling $660,000. The courtroom fell silent as the number appeared on screen. Linda leaned toward Archer, whispering urgently. Their planned narrative, the devoted daughter denied her birthright, was crumbling against documented exploitation. The afternoon brought 3 witnesses from Linda's past former in-laws and distant relatives she'd challenged in previous inheritance disputes. Each testimony painted a consistent picture of systematic financial predation. Mark shifted uncomfortably during the third witness, creating distance between himself and Linda with each damning answer. "And how many times did Mrs. Carter visit her uncle during his final illness?" Evan asked. "Once," the witness replied, "the day after he revised his will." The judge's gaze sharpened, his pen pausing mid-note. When court adjourned, reporters clustered around Linda, but her rehearsed tears seemed theatrical now, her claims of maternal devotion hollow against the morning's evidence. I packed my briefcase methodically, neither rushing nor lingering. "First round to us," Evan murmured as we exited. "But tomorrow will be harder." I nodded, aware of Linda watching from across the rotunda, her expression calculating. Tomorrow would bring their counter-witnesses, emotional appeals, and character assassination. But for the first time since Charles's death, I felt his presence beside me, not as grief but as strength. His voice echoed in my mind. "Justice isn't always found in courtrooms. Sometimes it's in standing firmly for truth." And the truth was finally emerging. One document, one testimony, one undeniable fact at a time. After the trial was over for the day, the tap of Linda's designer heels echoes down the hallway of the Attorney General's office, unnaturally loud against the morning quiet. She appears at my doorway unannounced, eyes already glistening with tears that haven't fallen yet. A performance prepared before arrival. Josie. Her voice breaks on cue. Can we talk? Just us? I gesture to the chair across from my desk, noting the familiar bracelet at her wrist, the one Charles bought her for her 30th birthday. She's brought childhood photos too, spread across my desk like playing cards. Blood is thicker than water, Josie, she says, her fingers tracing the edge of a faded Polaroid me at 6, sitting on Charles's lap while he reads. Linda wasn't there that day. We're still family despite everything. Is that why you're here? Family sentiment? She dabs at the corner of her eye. We want to settle. We'll drop the case for just half the inheritance. It's more than fair. Half of what Charles explicitly left to me. Linda's hand trembles as she pushes a photo closer, Margaret holding me at my high school graduation. Your grandmother would want us to reconcile. Margaret always believed in forgiveness. My phone buzzes. Mark. The third call in 20 minutes. A two-front assault. Your cousins are worried about you, Josie, Linda continues. Everyone thinks you're making a terrible mistake. They all remember how close we were. Something inside me wavers, that old childish hope flaring briefly before I extinguish it. I stand, gathering her photos into a neat stack. Court reconvenes at 9 tomorrow, Mother. The courthouse feels different this morning. Tension hangs heavy in the air as Miles Archer approaches the bench, his confidence bordering on theatrical arrogance. Your Honor, he begins, voice pitched to Carrie. This case, at its core, is about manipulation. Manipulation of an elderly man by a woman who positioned herself as his sole caretaker while systematically isolating him from his daughter, his true blood relation. I watch the judge's expression, searching for signs of doubt. Archer is good, better than I expected. The defense has presented Charles Carter as a brilliant legal mind untouched by age. But brilliance creates blindness, Your Honor. Miss Carter orchestrated a campaign to control her grandfather's final years and, consequently, his estate. Archer turns, gesturing dramatically toward me. We move for an immediate psychological evaluation of Josephine Carter. This pattern of control suggests deep-seated issues requiring professional assessment before any distribution of assets. Whispers ripple through the courtroom. Beside me, Evan scribbles furiously on his legal pad. Furthermore, Archer continues, we present affidavits from 3 of Charles Carter's former colleagues who noted his declining faculties in his final years. My stomach tightens. These are new witnesses, people who barely knew Charles in his retirement. The execution of the will itself contains procedural irregularities, Archer announces, producing documents with a flourish, witnessed by individuals with clear loyalty to Miss Carter rather than neutral parties. Judge Reynolds glances at me, his expression unreadable. For the first time, I feel uncertain about the outcome. Then Charles's doctor takes the stand, and everything changes. Mr. Carter suffered from arthritis in his hands, Dr. Mendoza testified, but his mind remained exceptionally clear. I administered cognitive assessments every 6 months, as was his request. He scored in the superior range until his final days. I lean toward Evan, whispering urgently, Charles's bank manager, call him next. Evan's eyebrows raise. We didn't prepare for him. Trust me. Minutes later, William Foster takes the stand, his bow tie slightly crooked above a starched collar. Mr. Foster, Evan begins. Did Linda Carter ever attempt to access her father's accounts during his lifetime? Archer leaps to his feet. Objection! Beyond the scope. I'll allow it, Judge Reynolds says, his interest clearly piqued. The witness may answer. Foster adjusts his glasses. Yes, on 3 separate occasions. Most recently, 4 days before Mr. Carter's passing. She presented a healthcare power of attorney document which Mr. Carter had never signed. The courtroom falls silent. I feel Linda's stare burning into my back, but I don't turn. No further questions, Evan says. What began as our defense has transformed into their prosecution. The final day arrives with the courtroom packed to capacity. I take the stand, hyper-aware of every eye upon me. Miss Carter, Evan begins. Why are you contesting your parents' claim to your grandfather's estate? I meet his gaze steadily. This case has never been about money. Methodically, I recount a lifetime of abandonment holidays spent waiting by windows, school events with empty chairs, birthdays marked by brief phone calls that came days late. "I'd like to read from my grandfather's journal," I say, opening the leather-bound book. "The 12th of October 2018. Linda called today." I had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that my illness might inspire her to become a mother at last. Instead, she asked about my investment portfolio. Linda shifts uncomfortably as I continue, my voice steady. "And this," I say, holding up a faded calendar, "is my grandmother Margaret's system for tracking Linda's promised visits." Red X marks cover the pages, each representing a disappointment. 22 years of broken promises, Your Honor." When I finish, Evan rises again. "Your Honor, we request permission to play a video deposition from Charles Carter, recorded 6 months before his death." Archer objects immediately, but Judge Reynolds overrules him. Charles appears on the courtroom screens, sitting in his study. His hands may be gnarled with arthritis, but his eyes are sharp, his voice clear and deliberate. "I make this recording in sound mind and body," he begins, anticipating a challenge to my will. "I leave my estate to my granddaughter, Josephine, not out of confusion or manipulation, but with clarity of purpose." He leans forward slightly, those judicial eyes I knew so well looking directly into the camera. "Linda, if you're watching this, know that I loved you until my last breath, but you chose absence. Josephine chose loyalty. The law recognizes both blood and choice, and so did I." Linda gasps audibly. Mark stares at his shoes. Financial records appear next. 22 years of monthly payments highlighted in red. $660,000 total. A calendar shows Josephine's daily care for Charles, 2,500 days versus Linda's 8 visits over the same period. Finally, the clerk reads Charles's letter to the court, his words filling the room. "I appoint Josephine my executor, knowing she alone possesses the integrity this responsibility requires." Judge Reynolds delivers his ruling without returning to chambers. This court finds the challenge to Charles Carter's will without merit. The will is upheld in its entirety. He pauses, removing his glasses. "I find this lawsuit frivolous at best, predatory at worst. Attorney fees will be paid by the plaintiffs." Linda jumps to her feet. "This is absurd. I'm his daughter." "Order," Judge Reynolds snaps, his gavel punctuating the command. "This court is adjourned." Reporters swarm as we exit the courthouse. Linda pushes through them, reaching for my arm. "Josie," she pleads, her voice breaking. "I'm your mother." I turn to face her fully, camera flashes illuminating the moment. "Margaret was my mother," I say quietly. "You gave birth." Linda collapses into tears, the scene playing out before a dozen news cameras. Mark walks away without a backward glance. The power dynamic from our first courthouse encounter has inverted completely. Outside, sunlight warms my face. I shrug off my professional jacket, suddenly feeling lighter than I have in months. "Deep breath," Evan says, smiling beside me. "You did it. How do you want to celebrate?" I consider this as we walk down the courthouse steps. "I think I'll plant roses at their graves today." The driver opens the car door with a nod. "Where to, Assistant District Attorney Carter?" I slide into the back seat, catching a glimpse of the courthouse growing smaller in the window. "Home," I say. Finally, just home. A year later, the morning light streams through my office windows I unblocked last month after realizing I'd been working in Charles's shadows for too long. The walls breathe now, lined with law books that blend his collection with volumes I've added. Margaret's knitting basket sits repurposed on my credenza, filled with case notes instead of yarn but still carrying her essence. The phone rings, jolting me from contemplation. "Judge Carter?" It's Angela from the Foundation. Her voice brims with the particular warmth reserved for good news. "The scholarship committee just approved the first 5 recipients for the Carter Fund." My fingers trace Charles's gavel, polished oak now displayed prominently on my desk. "Tell me about them." "All raised by grandparents. One girl from Portland reminds me of your story. Her essay mentioned feeling more authentic with her grandmother than she ever did with her mother." Something uncurls in my chest. That's exactly what we created this for. I glance at my calendar, no longer crammed with obligations, but filled with purpose. The inheritance that Linda and Mark had coveted now funds college educations for children whose stories mirror my own. The robing ceremony last week still feels dreamlike. Becoming a circuit court judge in the very courthouse where my battle with Linda played out carries a symmetry even Charles couldn't have scripted. Judge Rivers placed the black robe over my shoulders in the chamber Charles once used, her hands steady on fabric that carries generations of justice. "Your grandfather stood exactly where you are," she'd whispered, "but you've already gone further than he hoped." Before leaving that day, I slipped a small photo of Margaret and Charles into the robe's inner pocket, where it rests against my heart during proceedings. The court clerk did a double take when changing the nameplate outside the chamber door. "The Honorable Josephine Carter." The echo of Charles's title now carries forward through me. The letter from Linda arrived yesterday. Cream envelope, expensive stationery, her flowing script offering reconciliation, now that I've made something of myself. A year ago, it would have triggered desperate hope or burning anger. Today, I simply read it twice, considering her words with the same measured assessment I give to any case before my bench. My response was brief. "I wish you well, but our paths diverged long ago." No anger, no vindication needed, only clarity. Judge Rivers noticed the shift over coffee this morning. "Charles would be proud of your piece," she said. "The hardest judgment is knowing when to close a case for good." She's right. I'm finally free from the cycle of hoping for impossible parental love. The wound that defined me has become a scar that simply marks a boundary visible but no longer painful. The healing hasn't been solitary. I've started an informal mentoring program for young lawyers, especially those navigating complicated family dynamics. The roses I plant at Margaret and Charles's graves bloom now in spring and fall. My therapist, whom I no longer hesitate to mention in conversations with colleagues, helped me create new holiday traditions to replace painful memories. Last night, I wrote in my journal, "Finding family isn't about blood but about presence." Yesterday, Jennifer Davis, a young attorney with eyes that carry too much history, stopped me in the hallway. "My mother's contesting my grandmother's will," she admitted, voice barely steady. "I didn't impose my story on her, but shared Charles's wisdom. Justice begins with honoring truth." 5 years from now, standing before the mirror in the Massachusetts Supreme Court chambers at 41, I adjust my robe and catch a glimpse of my reflection. For a moment, Linda's mocking face from that first courtroom flashes in memory, but it's distant thunder, no longer a storm that threatens to drown me. The bailiff's voice echoes through the chamber. "All rise for Justice Carter." The weight of legacy rests on my shoulders with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who I am. 20 years later, gray threads through my hair as I preside over a family case remarkably similar to my own. The young woman on the stand speaks of grandparents who raised her when parents abandoned their responsibilities. I quote Charles's letter verbatim, the words burned into my memory. "Justice isn't always found in courtrooms. Sometimes it's in standing firmly for truth." My closing statement resonates through the chamber. Justice is the family we choose. Presence is how we prove it. A new generation of lawyers scribbles notes, learning not just law but legacy. As the courtroom clears, my fingers touch the small photo in my robe pocket, now worn at the edges but clear in purpose. Charles was right. Love is a choice we make every day.